Okay. Yeah. So if you just want to type into the chat your favorite holiday tradition or thing to celebrate during this weekend, where folks are just usually gather around family or friends or loved ones to share and enjoy time together. But I think my favorite tradition during this weekend is probably helping my family in the kitchen just with whatever they need. Um, um, these are just the expectations for the meeting. It's been the same set of rules for the previous workshops, but again, just a reminder to take time to be mindful of others, think before you speak when you're expressing yourself, but also use the opportunity to use the chat and emojis. Um, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out in any way, if that's chat, raising your hand, or unmuting yourself. But we'll go ahead and get started with the fifth workshop today on the 22nd. This is the outline of our workshop so far. So I'm gonna do a quick recap on the upcoming science fairs and the different deadlines in each of those. We'll watch a clip that kind of explains what happens during while conducting an experiment and a at-home experiment, the different tips and tools to organize your uh, when you're documenting your experiment procedure. We'll have time in a breakout session for NASEP students, each of you, to ask us questions, or we'll work on the research guideline with you just so that you're able to come out of this workshop with some outline and already set documentation for your experiment. We'll do a quick recap on what the goals are for next time. And yeah, these are the upcoming science fairs, and I apologize for the fonts. This is just because they're hyperlinks and I haven't found a way to necessarily change the font color, but um, the Southern Arizona Research Science and Engineering Foundation Regional Science Engineering Fair, it can be abbreviated down to SARSEF, a Regional Science Engineering Fair. These are the different deadlines for that. And there's different categories and age groups within this. So high school judging will begin on March 8th. The Arizona Science and Engineering Fair, ASEF, the registration closes early February. Um, so just to keep in mind, these different dates that are highlighted in blue, those are when the actual registration deadline closes. So you'll need your information a few weeks before that, so you're able to turn it in on time. The Junior Science and Humanities Symposium is that deadline is beginning of February, and the National American Indian Science and Engineering Fair is in February. So based on these deadlines, I just want students to have enough time to organize your experiment data and have your how many sets of data collection you need. If whether you're running different test results or conducting interviews or taking observations of some type, we just want you to have time before these deadline dates for you to analyze your data, organize it in a way that's presentable, and have an abstract in basically what we're having you require in your guideline at this moment is what you'll probably have to turn into these different fairs. And so that might include an abstract. And so those are 150 words or less. So it's not a huge, it's not a super long document you have to turn in, but it compiles some information. So the more time you give yourself to be able to work on these things and allow us to assist you, will hopefully keep you stress-free when these deadlines come around. But these are just the things we're kind of gauging around, and just keep time management in consideration when we're doing these. So we're gonna watch a quick little video. This, oh, I'm barely seeing everyone's comments now. Oh yeah, football, eating, dog show, that's cute. Okay. So this was, if any of y'all are familiar, by a thumbs up, who has heard of 5-minute crafts on Facebook, Instagram. Yeah, a lot of things. And so a lot of those can be exaggerated, or even some of them are edited in a way to show the audience false results. And so this lady, she debunks these kinds of videos or these kinds of socials. Yeah, I know. It's frustrating. I despise them too a little. Some are straight out ridiculous, but I'll go ahead and play the intro to this video, and then I'm going to change it to the 4-minute mark. And then we're going to watch about 10 minutes of it. And because she conducts a experiment, so, and kind of walks us through that. So I'm going to try to play the audio now. Let me know if this is too loud for folks. I'm going to play her intro.
With that, I'm Anne Reardon, and this is an episode of Debunking, where we test viral videos from all over the internet to see if they are real or fake. Speaking of real...
Is that an okay audio by folks? Okay, I'm going to play it full screen, and then I'll just let us snack or do what you need to, but we're just going to watch this together.
Or fake. Let's start with this first clip from 5-Minute Crafts, where they're showing you how to test if your food is real or fake. They have all different ice creams, and they're shining a UV light or a black light onto them.
Okay.
Little bits of cotton candy, or fairy floss as we call it here in Australia, into your blender, pile it all the way up to the top, then turn it on and wait for it to blend. Get a close-up shot of turning it on, and then play the footage in reverse. It's just another fake cooking hack from 5-Minute Crafts, where they take something they know doesn't work and they're presenting it in a way to tell you that it does work. That is disinformation, deliberately misinforming your audience. Okay, moving on. Anna Co asks, hi Anne, could this be real or is it fake? Let's take a look.
The type of pan you use has a big impact on how your desserts bake. Cookies baked on a dark tray will have a more crispy edge, and the bottom will brown more than those baked on a light tray. For cakes, because the dark metal conducts heat more quickly, the bottom of the cake will be darker, and the edges of the cake will also set faster.
That's an interesting claim. Now, this, to be clear, is not going to be disinformation. If this is wrong, this will be misinformation, where the person who is telling you believes that it's true, and that's what they think it is, but it may not be correct. In order for me to test it and show it to you, I'm going to have to buy a whole lot of light and dark trays. And then we need to control for all the other variables. So I'll use the exact same cake ingredients, all at room temperature, mixed for a set length of time just before pouring it into a tin, and then spreading it out and baking it at the same temperature on the same shelf in the same oven for exactly the same length of time. So the only variable that we're changing here is the tray. I've deliberately bought trays that are made of different metals because I think that that is going to be the biggest factor, not what colour the tray is, but we'll see what the results say. The one that you just saw bake said it was made of anodised aluminium. And now if we have a look at these ones, the light rose-coloured tray says it's made of heavy-duty carbon steel. The light-coloured shiny one is made of stainless steel with no coatings over the top. The dark coloured one on the bottom left is made from pressed aluminium with a non-stick coating. And the other dark one did not say what it was made of anywhere on the label, but the website said it was steel, but the label doesn't confirm or deny that. And just for good measure, I want to bake it in Pyrex or glass as well, because that is a really poor conductor, so it gives us a good comparison. Before we look at the results, I want to say a big thank you to today's sponsor, Kamakoto Knives.
Okay, so like while I'm skipping through the ads, basically she's testing that whoever made that video was saying the different types of pans can affect the different level and I guess evenness of cooking. And that's like she said, kind of a big claim to make just on pan color. And so that's what she's testing out. And just keep in mind the variables that she's keeping the same, she's changing throughout her experiment, and kind of the details she noted within that. I'm just gonna wait for a little bit longer. It shouldn't be too much longer, but I think as long as you understand what she's testing at this point, then the remaining of the video should be easy to follow.
Now back to our cakes. To understand the difference that the different metals are going to make when you're baking, you need a basic knowledge of thermal conduction, which is just fancy words for heat transfer between materials. Imagine that this is a cross section of the base of our cake pan. So we've cut it in half down the middle, and this is the cake batter, and this is just the air in the room. So to start with, everything is at room temperature, which means it has some heat. So to represent that heat, I'm going to use some red lollies. Nothing needs to move around because it's all the same temperature. But then when we put this in the oven, all of a sudden there's a lot more heat in the air than there is in here or here. And what happens next depends on how good a thermal conductor this metal is.
Let's go.
Some metals are very good thermal conductors, which means they quickly move the heat from the air in the oven into the metal and into the cake batter on the other side. They're very efficient. But other metals are a little more reluctant to help. Matt, can you move the heat for me, please?
Yeah, in a minute, Mum.
He will get the job done. It's just going to take a little while longer to transfer that heat. Now, if we just look at the metals in the trays that I bought, aluminium is going to be your fastest heat conductor. And next, quite a bit further down, is your steel. Steel is made of a mixture of different things in there, so it can range depending on the type of steel as to how fast that is going to conduct the heat. And the slowest of the ones we have is glass. But what if you don't have the label for the tray anymore and you have a tray at home, you have no idea what it's made of? How can you test if it's going to be a good thermal conductor or not? Well, one thing you can do is feel it and compare two trays next to each other. If right now in your room, just look around and see if you can find something made of wood and something made of metal. And if you put your hand on each of those, the metal will feel much colder. Now, you know it's not colder, you know they're both room temperature, but what's happening is when your hand is touching the metal is a good thermal conductor, so it is pulling the heat out of your hand because your hand is hotter than the room and it's trying to even it out. The wood will still do that, it will just do it much more slowly. So that makes us feel as though the metal is very cold, but really it's the same temperature as the wood, it's just making your hand feel cold. So for wood and metal, you can probably tell that difference, but metal and metal are a bit closer together, so it can be a bit harder to tell. So a more specific test you can do is what I like to call the ice cream test. Just place a cube of ice cream onto each tray and wait. The one that is the best thermal conductor is going to transfer the heat from the tray into the ice cream the fastest and therefore melt the ice cream the fastest. You can see there the aluminium melted it really quickly and the slowest here was the stainless steel. Let's do that test again with the other two pans so we can see where they sit. Both the aluminium ones are really fast And then slowly comes the stainless steel, and eventually the glass melts the ice cream.
Hot plants wore many hats.
So now you know which ones are the best thermal conductors, and you can see it had nothing to do with whether the pan was light or dark in colour. It was just to do with what the pan was made of. Looking at all the cakes baked in all the tins, you really can't see much difference between them. When it comes to baking a thin cake like this, things like changing the temperature of your oven, the time you cooked it for, they're going to make a lot more difference than changing the pan that you baked it in. But some things are a lot more finicky on oven temperature than others. Things like macarons, for example, are really quite fussy little biscuits. So if I bake some macarons on every different tray in the same oven at the same temperature, we might be able to see more of a difference. As well as the pans that I tested before, I also wanted to mention that you can use things like a silpat, which is made of silicon and fiberglass, which are both poor conductors, so they're going to slow down the heat transfer. And you can get a baking tray like this one that is air-gapped. So you've got 2 layers of metal with a gap of air in the middle, which again slows down and evens out that heat transfer. Now, you don't just have to consider what type of metal your tray is made of, but you also need to consider how thick that metal is, because that will affect how quickly it can take heat through the metal and pass it into the food. And the ice cream test is not going to reflect that. This is one of the thinnest pans, and it's aluminium, and you can see the difference just between these two. This one is browner, even though they were baked at the exact same temperature for the same length of time. And you can see they're all cracked. They are not good looking macarons. It did not like that fast heat transfer. These ones are also all cracked, and this would be one of the thinnest steel trays that we have. Moving right along to the carbon steel and the stainless steel ones, they are looking a little bit better, but we still have a fair bit of cracking. Then moving those along, we have glass and the thicker aluminium. So even though in the ice cream test, it looked like this was exactly the same as the other aluminium, it is substantially thicker on the base here, which makes that heat transfer slower, and the macarons much preferred that. We've got no cracks. And the glass, which, as you know, is the poorest conductor out of the ones we tested, has slowly heated them up, and it actually had to be left in the oven 3 minutes longer because they were not done at the same time as the others. And lastly, the air-gapped tray, we've got the silpat on one half, which is slowing it down even further, and the air gap on the other, providing that slow heat, which macarons like. So if you're baking something like macarons, you might want to invest in a tray that is thick and a slow conductor, because that will probably work best for those. But for everything else, you're probably not going to notice a difference. And it would make more of an effect if you just adjust your oven temperature. So if you've got a really thin aluminium pan, just turn your temperature of your oven down a little bit and you are not going to notice. You don't need to rush out and buy new pans. You especially don't need to buy them based on whether they are light or dark. Okay, next, Jared has sent in this clip.
Okay. So I kind of took those tips a little helpful. I like to bake myself, and hopefully from that you were able to intake or kind of grasp on what it means to control variables in your experiment, and like identifying which ones need to be changed versus which ones shouldn't, based on what you're testing. And so in that case, she was testing the different types of pans, whether based on light or dark, like the person had indicated in the original video. And then also keeping each of those processes the same. And so we'll talk about that in what we're in the experiment documentation, but hopefully you like that. I think I'm gonna share the rest of it, which is just a little longer. This is also a helpful tip too when we're doing research. So just bear with me for like 2 more minutes.
They've got baking soda. You don't need to rush out and buy new pans. You especially don't need to buy them based on whether they are light or dark. Okay, next, Jared has sent in this clip. They've got baking soda, putting it in some water. adding spinach. Baking soda's high alkaline pH breaks down pesticides. Clean in baking soda solution before eating. So that video is telling us we should rinse all our fruit and veggies in a baking soda solution to get off any traces of pesticides. Now, I think I know the study that they have taken this from, but they have taken it so far out of context that it's no longer true. The study that was done firstly on apples, not on spinach or any other fruit or vegetables, just on apples. And they didn't just rinse it, they soaked it for 8 minutes in the solution of bicarb. And they weren't testing the tiny amounts of pesticides that would be on the residue when you get it from the shop. They were dousing them in pesticides, letting it dry, and then washing it to see what percentage it got off using the bicarb. They were actually talking about something that could be used further back before it even got to market. They weren't looking at stuff you could do at home. That wasn't the purpose of the study. And also the major thing is they only tested 2 pesticides. There are hundreds of different pesticides that are used in the production of fruits and vegetables, and they only tested 2. And if you read the study, it says in the study, more tests are going to be needed to be done with all the other pesticides. You can't just extrapolate from one thing and go, oh, yeah, that'll work for everything. You can't do that. So no, do not start washing your fruit and vegetables in baking soda or soaking them or doing any of that. Just wash them really well in water and enjoy eating them because they are good for you.
Yes. Yeah, so I think also that last part is important to keep in mind is when that's 5-minute crafts. They don't hold a lot accountable for themselves, but it's just important to keep in mind exactly what was conducted and whatever studying you're referencing to. And that's why it's important, why we also create the procedures we do, because when people are looking up different research and publications, it comes down to exactly what samples were used, what kind of species, or like what where the origins of the materials they also tested on. Like she had said, they doused it in like pesticides, which is not really what happens in a grocery store when it comes to a person's home. So what they were testing is already a totally different setting from what 5-minute crafts is telling people to do, which is like, oh, you wash your foods at home, it'll be fine. But that's not the study they're referencing. So I hope that kind of just provides like a nice at-home example of like what it means to have a clear and organized experiment conduction process. Let me make this full screen again. But okay. But did anyone have any questions on that video, or have like any comments or like reflection on it, or didn't like anything she had done, or stuff she could have done differently maybe? Yeah, Sophia, go ahead.
I just found it so convenient because taking like labs at the university level, like that still makes a lot of sense, and we still use that in labs for chemistry and biochemistry. So controls are so important because it can completely mess up your experiment if you change like the slightest thing.
Yeah, like even just putting it on a different oven rack, right? That would have not been a consistent, like, or a very well organized experiment procedure. And she made sure to emphasize, like, I'm doing the same time, same temperature, same oven rack, same cake batter. It's just one thing that's changing.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's important. I have friends who do biochem and a lot of things, and it's a lot to make sure that you're paying attention to the details. Yeah, anyone else? Or hopefully that's helpful too for some cooking this weekend. That there's different conductors, and macarons is important if you want to cook evenly. But anywho, oh yeah, go ahead, Carol.
I think that this example was great because it's important how you frame your research question or results, because maybe it wasn't the intent of the 5-minute crafts person to say that this is a comparison just between dark and light pans, you know. They could have maybe that wasn't their intention, but because of what they said, it came off as like it's the color that matters. And so her testing that it's not the color that makes the difference, it's the composition of the pan is important, you know. And so that is one way to think of like what your research topic is and what you're wanting to test, you know. And yeah, I think that also figuring out what your methods is important, because if somebody else wants to recreate it like me from watching that, it's like, oh, I have pans at home, I want to do the things that she said, and if it wasn't clear, then it would be hard for me, and there could be other things that didn't come out correctly, and I could be like that 5-minute crafts person saying something that was not fully correct, you know. And I even like the definition that she had for like misinformation, because it's not like this person is being dishonest, it's because they think that this is the actual, like this is factual, but the process of what they're doing might not be fully backed up. So yeah, just some thoughts on that video. And it's funny, it seems like there's a lot of people who don't like 5-minute crafts just because of how outlandish it can be sometimes.
Oh yeah, no, there's a whole YouTube world of people debunking these things or like testing them out, and I mean, it's funny. Yeah, I agree. I think what the way she explained it is enough for someone to be like, yeah, I wonder how my pans conduct heat, and you can kind of just follow what she had mentioned and do your own thing. I'm glad that it explained a little more of why those factors are important, especially in something like this, in any experiment. And that's why we distinguish those differences and identify the different characteristics. And like she had said, if there's for some reason you're not able to find what something is, like one of the pans she couldn't, it's all about research, comparing it to other things that share similar characteristics. But yeah, I'm glad y'all enjoyed it, and just kind of wanted to reiterate some things we already mentioned so far. But your experiment procedure is a written up, basically like step-by-step guide and instructions of how you conducted your experiment, and something that a person, an audience, or a reader will also reference to. Some things to just remind yourselves of when you're completing this, or thinking of how you want to, or thinking of the methods and materials you want to be using, is beforehand, like she did in the video, if you're testing a original method, if you're testing some type of study or model that has been published by other people, by other researchers and scientists, it's important that you reference that, and reference that that is what, in some capacity, you are basing your experiment off of that. And there's different, if there's questions on that, talk to us, because the dynamic of how you test a method can honestly vary by experiment. You might want to test different things, and based on what we saw in that video, there's different ways we could have interpreted that research question or the statement the 5-minute crafts person said, and we could there's different ways of interpreting that. So just something to keep in mind when you're writing down different steps and especially materials and data results. You're using units of measurements at every time you have any variable that you're listing that measurement. So when you're referencing, when you go back, there's no way that you could be confused or a different person can be confused. That's something you don't want to have to happen down the road, is retrace all your steps and try to think what had happened at that step. And at some point, if there's a way that you are unsure, that's also that's also a way of having mis or disinformation, like she had mentioned. Just staying organized helps protect like your experiment, the results that are going to come out of that, so that they're authentic and true. When you're doing a procedure, the repeated steps that are remaining consistent, and the different variables, independent and controlled variables you identify. So what she had done is repeated all the same steps for the level of cooking, which we said kept temperature same, the oven temperature same, kept the time of cooking the same, kept the position at where the pan would sit and while it cooked, that remained the same. And it was the only thing that changed was the pan material itself. So even the cake batter or macaron batter she had used remained the same. So when you repeat those steps, indicate that in your procedure. Your list of materials can be it can be an actual bulleted list, or you can list it in a paragraph format for now and be like, I will be using this many test strips, and I'm going to gather this distilled water from fries, and I will be using I'll be using this device to find the locations or indicate the well locations. You can use your phone GPS, or you can just list it as a bulleted list, or both for now. When you're taking data collection or any step in your experiment, you're just you're definitely indicating how you're conducting it and how that step is done in detail, and when it is happening. So for your own record's sake, it's important to just document when these things are occurring. If you need to go back and be like, well, what was different that day? Was it weather? Did something happen dramatic? At least you have that date to reference, rather than not kind of remembering when it happened. So the little details you might not always think will matter in the future can definitely help you later when you're analyzing results. So keeping these all in mind, you can reference this, take a screenshot on your phone and just use it when you're doing the experiment. It's one thing for sure is it's easy to look at this list and think that you will remember. However, like Sophia said, even in college, higher education, in laboratory settings, this is even like a lot of stuff to keep track of. So you're taking your time, ensuring that you're at least completing these steps, the majority of them, you will be okay, and it will be easier for you in the long run. But just remember that when you are doing this, that this is going to be a procedure that someone who knows nothing about your experiment will be able to reference and mimic, just like what we had talked about for her in the YouTube video. Is like, oh, well, she made her procedure pretty well, pretty clear, and so we could easily probably copy her experiment. Maybe not because we don't have those pans like she has, but something along that. Is there any questions on this slide before we move on? Natalia, did you have any questions on or need any clarification on this before? Okay.
I'm good. I'm just taking notes on it.
Okay, yeah, no worries. Just want to check in.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And so in terms of when it comes down to actual organization for your data, for your experiment materials, you're gonna have some sort of experiment or laboratory notebook. This can be digital or physical. Y'all have iPads, so you're able to bring up Google Docs or Google Sheets. You can also use Word, or you can actually just have a simple spiraled notebook for you to use. But one thing you do want to make sure is that in the beginning of that physical notebook, you just leave some space for table of contents. So in your notebook, you're going to want to number pages. And these are pages you're going to be referencing. So it's going to go from 1 to X, so however many you need, but you're going to have these sections for sure. And these are ones that should be, that we should be working on right now in the guideline, but it's your data. So all of the data you'll be collecting, your title, which is your research purpose and abstract, and then your hypothesis, so a section for that, your materials section, so where you're going to be listing your materials, your notes for that, and then also your methods. So these are, I think, general sections for you to use now to put things in and your notes in. When you're doing actual test samples, you're wanting to make sure you have it labeled. I think when you, for example, if we're going to be doing water tests, the way it's going to come out, it's like a test strip, a plain test strip, and it's going to, whenever you're done dipping in whatever water sample, after a certain amount of time, it's going to show a color. And this is a color that you're going to have a reference on a scale. And that scale is going to tell you what contaminant is in that water based on the color. Say you don't want to keep that test strip, but you just want to document how it looks, you can take a photo, put it on a flat piece of paper, and just write the date, time, the water source, take a photo of it, and that's a way for you to document and label your materials. And so I think it's just important that you're labeling these, especially if you're water sampling. That's super important that you're making sure you're not mixing different water samples and getting them confused with one that's just the control, ones that you're going to be testing, one that you might be putting through a filter, and etc. And if you need help with understanding how you need to organize this, reach out to us and we can help you too. Like I said, these are all going to just be different for different experiments and your research question, because you'll each be testing different things or gathering different types of data. So data and storing data is really important, that you're being also organized with that. If you don't have access to an online folder like Google Drive, I don't know what students can have access to right now besides Google Drive. Always a flash drive is good. Even your personal iPad might have OneDrive too. Do they have OneDrive, or because that's a Microsoft account, right? I'm not really sure. But whatever shared folder you have access to, that's a great way to start. But some things to ensure while you're doing your experiment and this can be in the Word, Excel sheet, or anything, is that you're constantly saving your work as you progress further. It's easy to stay working on something for like hours on end, and you might not even realize you didn't save, and something happens. And it's happened to, I think, all of us, but like you have lost something and you go back and you're like, I did not save this since like I've for a long time, and you lost all that work. So there's ways for you to also ensure auto save on things, but making sure that you're keeping copies in every step of the way also while you're working on things. Let's see, Google Drive or iCloud. Yes, I think that's way. So make it a habit to be constantly saving your work. If there's important like steps in your process where you're like saving a huge portion of your lab notebook or your presentation or your poster, you are copying that file type until you ensure that everything's up to date. I just voiced that because I've lost a lot of things. But one thing to also have safe and ensured stored data is by file names. And so even file naming can affect the way that a file is stored sometimes. And not to worry anyone, it's just that's just how it can be if you're using like ridiculous characters besides numbers and numerical. So I kind of have examples right here. Green is like a better, a stronger, or I guess more, it's just a better file type name to have it under, whether as red, like you seeing, it's just like presentation, your PowerPoint presentation one. This is going to be a challenge for you to probably find in a day or two after you save it somewhere. And your computer can also just want to store it somewhere else. I've had that happen to me just because I didn't name it anything specific. And the yellow line, which is NACEP guideline, that's like, that's not a bad file name. Maybe for your own personal folder, yeah, that's great. But it doesn't really give me any more besides it's just your NACEP guideline. And if you're wanting to have a better file type name for your actual experiment, if this is like an interview or interview notes, or a list of data collection or one photo of like a water quality test, you're gonna wanna name it in a file type that's under the green, which is the date, whatever your file name is. So it might be November 22nd, water quality test strip, number like 3. And then if you want to include your last name, you can at the for now, but and then this all can really just depend on what you're exactly saving it for. But you're just wanting to make it so that you can know what it is, who owns it, which is you, when it was taken, and that's the best thing that you can do to save your file as. There's many different formats too that I'm sure you're able to look up on Google. If you look up file name saving for blank data collection, there's probably better ways to store different things for different experiment conductions. Is there any questions on this, or do you need any more clarification, Natalia, on this portion of the lecture? This is like really the main last slide, and then we're gonna open it for discussion.
No, I got it.
Okay, so I just want to let students have the opportunity to ask us questions. If you need any clarification on the testing materials, this is a great time to ask, and for your research guideline. Natalia, if I can ask if you had received the email with the NACEP research or references and tools I had sent to the students. It should have like tribal, water, and air.
I'm gonna check right now. I think I might have.
Okay, and if you can just open it and let me know if you're able to see it and just access it, that'd be great. Just let me know if you can do that.
Yes, I got it. Geoscience update and resource list.
Okay. Awesome. So yeah, that list is basically a list of resources, organizations, or materials that I found. For things we've kind of mentioned so far, which is water quality, air quality, tribal like regulations for climate change or climate action, sustainability tools. But those are just resources you can use for now. And if there's more more that catches your interest that you're needing me to help contribute to, just let me know. That was,
Alrighty, thank you.
yeah, of course. Is there anything you wanted to say, Carol, for that, for any of these?
No, I was just gonna say that I have the research question guideline that you had emailed available. So if we wanted to go over that with Natalia at all, since there's time, we can, or let me see, am I able to share my screen?
Okay.
I think that you have to let me, because I made you the host. I think you have to give me permission.
Okay. Okay, I should have done it.
Okay, see. Great, it's working. Okay, so while we have you, Natalia, I think I'm sharing the right screen. I usually don't sometimes. So it should be the NACEP possible research question guidelines. Is that what you all see? Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So from what I remember, what we had discussed, I think that you selected to do your project on water, right, Natalia?
Yeah, I was, did water for the water kits too.
Great. So I thought that we could go through this just to fill out some of these things that so we can have it on file. By chance, do you have your research question that you're investigating?
I need to dig for it in my locker, but we're on break right now, so.
No worries. That's cool that you're on break.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's okay. But so you're doing water. You said that you need 5 test kits, right?
Yeah.
Okay, 5, no more than that, because we can send more if you need more.
That's about it.
Okay, so we'll send 5 test kits. And it sounds like you, although you have it in your locker, that you have a research question that you are, that you have in mind that you want to test, right?
Yeah.
Okay, did you have any questions for that for us? Because I think that's, for this is, we already did 1, 2. So yeah, you have a research question. Do you have a hypothesis?
I have the question. I don't have the exact question, but what it was I noticed that at my school, there's like a small little pond. It's really tiny, but the area and plants around it are like, it's really green. But where I go to my grandma's place, it's so weird. What I've noticed is that the plants there, they're sort of like dry in a way. And I'm just wondering why such a big, it's kind of like a river, a little stream, but I'm just wondering why, like this little pond, like is there a difference between like size, I guess, or like the environment?
Mhm.
That's what I'm just trying to figure out.
Great. So it sounds like from there you want to test water samples to see like what the composition of each.
Yeah, like what's in the water, I guess you could say. Like, why is it so green at my school's small pond, but when I go to my grandma's house, the stream, it's still dry?
Okay. And is there a so what do you think that the outcome is, or what do you think that the explanation for that might be? Like if you were
My
just
guess is maybe the distribution in water. I don't know. I guess it sounds a little silly, but since the pond, like the water is just like it's a big, I guess you could say it's a big pool and it's all together. While at my grandma's place, that stream, it's long, the water is like it's sometimes deep and it's sometimes shallow. And
so
I
the
wonder if the distribution might be a factor.
okay. So from what I'm hearing, what you're saying is that there's a lot more water in the area consistently, and that makes an impact, whereas the stream, there is water, but it fluctuates because sometimes there's a lot, sometimes there's a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Carol?
Mhm.
And it's Natalia is that correct?
Yes.
Great. Natalia, just a quick question. When you said that it's green, are you referring to the water being green, or are you referring to like the surrounding
Oh,
area?
the surrounding area.
Okay. So remind me, I think it sounds like at your grandmother's where there's a stream, it's less green there, but where at your school, I think you mentioned there's a small pond, and right around that area that it's really green.
Yeah, and they actually have like fish that live in the pond too.
Mhm. Interesting.
I always remember in elementary, we were experimenting on our ponds and like trying to find out what was living in there too. But I really have, it's really blurry. Like I really don't remember what like the outcome was, but I just remember that we did experiment, like what was in the pond, what kind of creatures were in there, and how was it affecting the environment.
Yeah, it sounds like they're two different, like it sounds like the results are going to be interesting in terms of just two what sound like to me very different kind of water sources, and just getting a sense of what is in each of those again, because like as you mentioned, one might have fish, one might not have kind of animals in it. So then just seeing kind of what the water quality test kit indicators show you, I think might be interesting. And then also to do that comparison between, I think that here you've described it to us in a way that like I have a sense of it, but it also
Yeah.
might make a great demonstration in your poster too, of like, here's the two environments, and they're very different. Both of them have water sources, and you're trying to kind of figure out like why could it be that something in the water is impacting the surrounding area,
Yes.
or what, so yeah, that sounds interesting to me.
Mhm. Yeah, and so I think that with since the question seems to extend more than just like what's in the water, it's also like you're talking about its impact on the surrounding environment.
Yeah.
Not just the water test kit is going to be sort of sufficient for your, not necessarily materials, but for the data that you gather, because doing just the water test kit and making like comparisons with what's in the water doesn't really connect with like the distribution part that you're talking about. So in order to connect that, I would say if you can use pictures, like taking pictures of the area, maybe some measurements of like how big the differences are, because
Yeah.
that you can measure and compare. I don't know how big this pond is, so it might not be feasible for you to measure it, but maybe look up to see if there's information on kind of how big it is, or the pictures also be used for comparison. Because as Vero said before, there's also ways to like not just through numbers to compare things, but through different qualities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And also finding out, again, like you said, what other things live in there, because maybe the fish poop is making it nice and green in the area, you know, if there's a lot of fish there.
Yeah.
So just, I guess when you're thinking of data that you can gather for this comparison, you can add that to the list. So I think that we kind of covered number 4. So like describe an experiment that you can perform. So with what you said, you can do comparing water samples, comparing photos or measurements, and also doing comparisons of wildlife that live in the area or in the water.
Okay.
And I think we covered number 5 because that's summarizing the process, but you can just write that up with like bullet points.
Carol,
Yes.
will you be sending this worksheet to us?
Yes, I can resend it. I think Vero might have sent it. Vero,
Hold on, I'm trying to check. It's not loading.
Vero, do you know the subject title for where this, because I have it from you directly, but I don't know what the
Yeah,
title might have been for what it was sent to the students.
let me find it.
So as she's finding that, the second page of this is just listing resources that can help with this project. So what are some resources that you think could help you with this project?
What do you mean by resources, Carol? Like people I could reach out to?
Yeah, that could be one. So people you can reach out to, or say you want to look up what the wildlife in there is in, like if you don't want to be in the water and be like looking with goggles to see like what can I see in there. Maybe there's somebody who's already compiled that, you know. So
yeah. Okay, I get it now. I know my old choir teacher, her husband was a environmental science, or he had some major in environmental science. And I believe that he's actually taking us on a couple of field trips. I know that I can reach out to him possibly. And I know there's other people, I just can't think of them right now, but I do know some people that I can reach out to about questions and stuff.
Cool. Yeah. Go ahead, Vero. I'm going to pull up the second worksheet just to see if there's any other things that we can talk about while we're on there. So feel free to jump in.
Yeah, no, that's great, Natalia. That's especially an important person to get in contact with. There is also people here at U of A that also like to work with other students too, regardless if you're in higher education or not. But so if you take a look at any of the water references, you might be able to find some helpful links for that. I think if you look on one of them, I referenced the Native American, let me just make sure. The Indigenous Resilience Center, which is here at U of A. And in that, they have a list of folks. The series is called Native Voices in STEM, but basically it's a bunch of Native professionals or people who work in Native communities that do research on all kinds of things. But there's a lot of people who speak on water and water quality and water supply. So if any of those, they have their contact information usually on the presenter stuff. So if you want to reach out to any of those people too, you're more than welcome to ask for that. And if you shoot them an email and need help with asking in an email, let us know. We can help you with that. I know that that is like a major step.
Yeah.
Is asking people to interview or even for help. But those, I think either way, those people usually speak on, if anyone is curious or has questions, they're more than happy to talk about how their research is. So if any of those people grasp your eye or catch your eye in their research, and you want to connect and need help, let me know, let Carol know.
Okay.
But I think those are other references that you might be able to connect to.
Yes.
And if I haven't added that link into it, I will add that. But yeah, it should be, under the Native Voices in STEM. It should be in there. I just saw it. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking now.
Cool. But
So this is the second page or the second worksheet. So we might have talked about some of this stuff already. So we talked about some materials that you'll need. So like the water test kits, some containers that are clean and sterile for you to collect your water samples and test the samples in, maybe a paper towel to put your samples on, maybe some gloves if you're working with pond water, because we don't know what could or could not be in there. So just to stay safe. And so those are some of the materials off my head that I think that you would need. And I just thought about question 2 and 3, and it was a little bit tricky for me, but I'm going to ask you, what do you think the independent and dependent variables in this experiment would be?
Hold on. I'm trying to remember again because I know what these were.
no worries. Take your time.
Oh, the definitions are on there, right?
Yes, on the
Okay. This variable that is being measured in response to. Well, I guess the dependent variable is maybe measuring the amount of water, maybe. I don't really know.
You're really close there. But what else are you measuring?
The length? Well, maybe not that.
So let me think if I can think of a example. So in the question or the research that was the 5-minute crafts example, there was, what do you think was the independent variable in that situation?
with the cooking,
Yes.
the temperature, well,
The temperature.
like, okay, she was controlling the temperature of the oven. She was also controlling the amount of, what was that thing called that she was using?
Mhm.
I can't remember what it was called,
I see.
but there were things that she did control.
Hmm. And that was like the temperature and things like that, right? So those.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'll say what I think it is, and then anybody else can say what they think it was, because I could be wrong. But I think that the independent variables were the pans, like the different types of pans. And based off of the different pans, what she was looking for was sort of like the change in temperature and color after the pans were in the oven for a set amount of time,
Yeah.
and the impact that it was making. So I think that the dependent variables were the outcomes that she was looking at afterwards, which was the color change, the temperature change and stuff. So would other people agree that those are the variables that were being tested?
That was my perspective from, like, I think since she was trying to test that initial statement, right, that the gentleman made, like, do you want your cake to come out extra kind of a little bit darker and maybe crispier? I don't know if that's the right word, but then kind of utilize the darker pan kind of a thing. So I agree with you. I think the independent variables were the different maybe colors of pans, and then the dependent variables was kind of how well cooked or crispy. Again, there might be a better word for that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I think that for this experiment, your independent variables would be the different water sources and samples that you collect. So
Okay.
the pond versus the creek/stream water. And then your dependent variables would be the outcomes of the different things that you're testing from those sources. So it could be like the color, it could be, which is more qualitative, since it's more about the qualities of the water, but things that would be quantitative, so about things that you can quantify in numbers and things like that, would be like the pH, the hardness, the bacteria, those sorts of things. And so those would be your dependent variables.
I just realized something. Could weather possibly play a role into this too?
It's interesting that you said that, Natalia, because I think that it's a variable you're wanting to try to control. So one of the things that I was gonna ask you was like, just like the person kind of in the video was trying to control things to make sure, right? She would use the
Yeah.
same cake batter, because so if I go and get a sample on a rainy day, and then I go and get a sample on the hottest day of the year at
Then
the
it's gonna be
other
like different.
right,
Like there's gonna
right.
be an obvious difference too.
Yes, you're right. And so you want to, as much as possible, have it controlled. So it makes it a little bit tricky, because like an ideal situation might be that like you're in one location, you of course do your best to grab really great kind of samples from that location,
Yeah.
and then that you move to the other location soon after and grab those as soon after, because you're trying to kind of avoid any super big differences, I think. So you're right there. You want to avoid any kind of big changes that
Mhm.
might cause, like you're saying, obvious kind of differences. So it's interesting because when you talked about the weather, that was something that I wanted to ask you is like, are there any things that you would try to control as much as possible that you might kind of think through, similar to what we saw in the video?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so great thoughts on your side. And the other thing I'll admit to you is just I feel like I work with an algebra academy class, and we're always talking about dependent and independent variables. And I feel like I always need the reminder, right? Even similar to you, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that they have the definition here, because that was helpful to me, because it's not something very common that we think about. But once you get kind of the hang of it, or you think through them a few times and see the definition a few times, they start to make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Mhm. So I think that takes us to 4. So things that you can control and keep constant. So when you collect your samples, or if you can't go to the location, depending on how far they are from one another, maybe saying like, once I collect my sample, I'm going to keep a window of an hour between when I collect it and then test it. And I'll do the same with the other sample, you know?
Yeah.
Or taking check of the weather to make sure that it's the same, around the same weather, I guess. Not doing it when it's rainy and stuff like that, because especially with the stream situation, like it could be bringing stuff from above that normally isn't there, or maybe there's more water there than normal. But if that happens, you can't control the weather.
Yeah,
So,
that's one thing too. Like I can't do that.
yeah, so that's one of the things you can't necessarily control for. So just
You can, Carol. Just kidding.
I don't know, but I feel like also it's so cold in Gallup, and I know that like the water is like freezing and it's cold outside.
Mhm. So if the water
So
is cold, oh, sorry, go ahead, Rudy.
I was gonna just mention a quick couple of things, but I'm gonna let you go first, Carol. Go ahead.
That's something that could be in your methods. Like even if you collect ice water, you can say I let it thaw for this amount of time and then tested the water. So yeah, it's since we can't control the weather, just take notes about the situation where you are collecting the water. You can control the time between you collect the water and when you test. So maybe that's something that you can consider instead if you have to
Yeah.
thaw things and whatnot. But go ahead, Rudy.
Just something I was gonna mention, and Natalia, you may recall, that's one of the reasons that the biosphere too is such a unique environment. Because
It's controlled.
exactly, right? So like it's
Yeah.
really unique kind of controlled space. So yeah, just kind of a different take there. And then the other thing that I would say is just that like you're saying, having that notation still of even if you do a great job of controlling the weather in terms of like you're collecting your sample at the same time, those types of things, it's still sometimes important to note like what the weather might be that day or that week, because as Veronique was explaining, and as we saw kind of in the video, if somebody wanted to replicate your study, it might be important for them to know like, oh, okay, she did it on a sunny day. And like Carol said, maybe for obvious reasons, she didn't go out on a rainy day. Or that these details of like, well, I grabbed some ice water and then I let it thaw for a certain amount of time and then I tested it. Those are all great details that would allow somebody else on this Zoom call to kind of come and conduct a very similar experiment to you, because you've taken note of those details and you've recorded those and to some extent reported them through your research.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just taking notes here.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
So I think we covered 4 for 5. Since we're sending you 5 test kits, you could have up to 5 samples, but it sounds like you've identified 2 water sources, so you can.
There might be a third one, but I'm not sure about it.
Okay.
This one's a lake.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't know where it is. I know it's like past the Rue area.
Okay.
But it's bigger than the pond, but I don't know about the amount of water.
I see. Okay. So yeah, once you figure that out, that would be your sample size. And if you're just keeping it to the 2 places, you might say, I'm going to test each site twice just to make sure that my results are consistent. So just figure out how you would like to do that with the kits that we provide. And I think we discussed methods and procedures a little bit, but if you wanted to talk about that more, then we can. But I think up to 6 is where we've sort of talked about and what Vera has covered. We haven't quite discussed results and the conclusion and stuff yet. But if you want to go further, we can talk about that stuff. But I think that what do you think? Have we covered everything that you think should be covered at this point?
Yeah, I think so. I think also just to note, Natalia, since you're doing water quality samples in different places, if you have iPhone, I'm pretty sure Android has it too, where you can mark it on the maps. But one thing that we did while water sampling in my other research is we dropped pins. And so you could do digital pins like on the app. And one thing I would just like screenshot whatever, like for example, I don't know if this is going to show. So like for a second, it has longitude, longitude. This is somewhere random in Phoenix, but I would just screenshot that so you have it, because if you happen to drop another pin somewhere, and this is what I mean by like copies of your data, but like if I were to add another pin, say if it didn't add it and it just erased the other one and did a new one, I wouldn't have that longitude and longitude anymore. So I would just do those for places you go to collect your water samples, and then those are places you can like input on a map later. But just something to note for that. But
Okay.
Yeah, in terms of everything else, I don't think so. I think I forgot to share the last slide, which is all that said was like have a safe travel home. Enjoy your weekend and holiday break. After we'll resume our NASEP. We'll have our NASEP workshop during the first week of not first week of December, the second week. So probably December 8th. And so we'll have more to look forward to then, unless that changes, but that's the date we've kind of just set for now, which is December 8th. And it should be around the same time, and that's a Thursday.
Okay.
But I don't think there's anything else to mention. I'm glad we were able to help you get started on that guideline. And
Yeah,
see, it is a lot to just kind of phrase the questions and everything. And I mean, I totally understand. But I'm glad we were able to help you, and I appreciate Sophia, Carol, and Rudy for
I think
helping.
I like this better.
Uh-huh.
If I'm being honest, like I like seeing other people at the meetings, but just like being able to just have like a one-on-one conversation and
Yeah.
everybody's there. Like that's what I just really like. And I guess that's why I didn't really ask like questions or about my project when we were doing things together with others.
Yeah, and so I think that's something we're gonna try, which is like more of the breakout rooms. So in a case like, yeah, what you're doing, this won't have to be in front of all the other students, but like
Yeah.
it can be a break room. Awesome, that's good feedback. Thank you. And
Yeah, that's really great. feedback, Natalia. Thank you for sharing that. Just because it does it does give us something to think about in terms of just how we might approach the other students and try to set up similar types of environments where we can, because I think
Yeah.
there has been a couple of situations where we've had a chance to kind of talk through people's projects and kind of get them to kind of start to think about it and them
Yeah, I
asking
feel like maybe
questions.
just sorry.
No, you're good. I want to hear your feedback.
It's just what I've noticed is just like some people are probably just more comfortable with that one-on-one instead of like talking in front of everyone. That way, I guess like their attention's focused on just talking about their project and not worrying about like other people who are listening and stuff.
Yeah, no, great feedback. Thanks again for sharing that. It's really helpful to us where we're conducting our own experiment of like how to best kind of serve students, and the feedback that you're giving us is helpful. So thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks, Natalia. Did you have anything before you need to hop off?
No, not really.
Okay, well, just I guess an update on the materials. We should be getting those to y'all as soon as we can.
Okay.
It's all about, yeah, it's something's out of our control at this point, but they are, anyways, they're gonna get to you. They're ordered. It's just a way of them actually getting here and delivered to us and to
Okay.
you. But just we'll certainly update everyone about those. Thanks for coming too, and I hope you have a great break and enjoy it. And if you still need questions or have anything in between all of this, you can still reach out to us. But have a good night and appreciate you coming out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Mhm.
great holiday weekend and overall holidays as we get back. So.
Oh, I'm so sorry, but I'll probably email you guys about this, but I'm really considering applying for U of A. I just kind of need help on where to start.
And reminder, Natalia, and this is probably just for me, everybody else probably knows, but are you in your junior year or senior year?
Oh, senior year.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely kind of reach out to you, and there may be like some application that there's not an application deadline. You're applying relatively early, but there might be some funding deadlines that I'll look at to just see, and if so, we might reach out to you sooner rather than later to see if we could help you along on that process. But that's great that you're considering the U of A. And then, of course, as the U of A provides you with information, you're always then going to have information from others to be able to kind of make the decision that's best for you. But
Yeah.
love to hear that you're considering us.
Yep. I'm sorry. I don't want to take too much of you guys' time, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think
No
we're all
worries.
excited.
That's awesome to know that you're thinking of this. Yeah, like he had said earlier, my Facebook memories came up and I got accepted like the fall before I'm gonna graduate. So it's good. That's good. More opportunities and funding opportunities too.
Thank you.
And don't forget your FAFSA. But yeah, have a great one. Like I said, more questions, let us know, but we're here to help you with that. And thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you guys. You guys have a good Thanksgiving.
You too.
Thanks.
Thank
You
your
too.
parents for us.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.